So hello everyone, in this video we'll be understanding about functions in JavaScript. So let's start the lesson. What is a function? A function is a group of statements that perform specific tasks and can be kept and maintained separately from main program. Functions provide a way to create reusable code packages which are more portable and easier to debug. Here are some advantages of using functions. So basically function is a separate group of code which you can call multiple times. So for example, if you want to call a function, or let's say you are doing a sum for a function, let's say you are doing sum for a number, two numbers, then you have to do or repeat the same code again and again. So instead of creating that code again and again and repeating that, you can create a reusable code in a function that you can call multiple times, and that will be actually applied. So let's understand it deeply and why we use function. Let's understand the features of function or advantages of using functions. So functions reduces the repetition of code within a program. Function allow us to extract commonly used block of code into a single component. Now you can perform the same task by calling this function wherever you want within your script without having to copy and paste the same block of code again and again. So basically you can reuse the code by just calling the function, and the same code will be reused multiple times. How many times you can call the function, so it's up to you. And if by this we solve the problem of repetition of code. That's a very big problem. We should not repeat the same code again and again in a program. Instead, we should create a function and then we should call that function. Functions makes the code much easier to maintain, since a function created once can be used many times. So any changes made inside a function automatically implemented at all places without touching the several files. For example, if you are creating a function which just prints something and you want to change the message, so you don't have to change it everywhere. You will just change that in a function, and then that will be applied to wherever that function is used. Functions makes it easier to eliminate the errors because we can directly debug the part where the function is written. We can debug the function only. So by this way we can solve the problem easily, and we don't have to search all the program where the error happened. So basically it is that when the program is subdivided into functions, if any error occur, you know exactly what function causing the error and where to find it. Therefore, fixing errors becomes much easier. How can we define and call a function? So the declaration of a function start with the function keyword. You can see here this function keyword, followed by the name of the function you want to create. Just like the variable name, we have a function name, followed by parentheses or this bracket, this round bracket. And finally, place your functions code between curly brackets. So in the curly brackets, we place our code, whatever it is. So this function keyword and the function name, it can be any name. You can specify it like a variable name. And then we have this parentheses, and then we have this curly bracket. Inside the curly bracket, you'll write the code which you want to actually repeat or you want to call multiple times. Now you can see this is an example of defining a function and calling it. So you can see we have a function keyword and we have named this function as say hello. After that, we have specified this parentheses, then the curly brackets. Inside the curly bracket, we're just writing this alert, hello, welcome to this website. And this alert is the code that we want to execute multiple times. And to execute this function, we just need to call this function like this. So calling a function is very simple. Just have to write the name of the function, open the brackets, and add a semicolon. So this will actually execute the code between the curly brackets for you. And you can call it multiple times. So let's say you have this say hello one time, and in the next line you can call the same thing again, and that will be repeated multiple times. So this is easier approach to write the code which you want to reuse. So once a function is defined, it can be called or invoked from anywhere in the document by typing its name followed by a set of parentheses, like say hello in the example above. You can see that. We also have parameters in a function parentheses. You can see that parameter 1, parameter 2. These parameters are used in the code block. So we can use some variables while calling the function or invoking the function. We can pass some value to those parameters, and then that value will be used inside the block of code or inside of the block of function. So basically, you can specify parameters when you define your function to accept input values at runtime. So these are some input values you can say. The parameters work like placeholder variables within a function. So these are placeholders that you can use in your code block. They're replaced at runtime by the values known as arguments provided to the function at the time of invocation. Let me just show you the example. You can see here in this we are calling we are creating a function display sum, and we are getting two parameters num1 and num2, and then we are creating a new variable total, and then we are just summing all those numbers which we got from the parameters. So num1 plus num2, so the values which will be passed in the function, we are getting the sum, and we are just storing it inside a total variable, and then we are just alerting it out. Now while calling the function, we can pass the value for those two parameters. So display sum, and now the first num1 will be 6 and the second num2 will be 20. So now we can call this function, and this will be giving us the alert, the sum of both these numbers 20 plus 6, 26, and same goes for this one. So we can reuse the same function with different parameters multiple times. So this way you can also pass some parameters to functions. We can also set some default values to parameters. Let's say if someone doesn't pass the value to the parameter, or it just calls something like this, you can say. So we can allow a default value to the parameter. This default value will allow us to store a default value, and we can reuse that default value if someone doesn't pass any value to the parameter. In this case, you can see we are not passing any value to the name parameter, so it will reuse this one. So it will reuse this default value in this case. So in this case, you can see hello name, the default value is guest, so we are getting hello guest. But in this case, we pass the value for the name, so it reused that value which we passed here. So John is used here, hello John. So this way you can set the default value for the parameter as well, and that parameter value will be used when the parameter value is not passed while calling the function. We can also return value back to the script that call the function. So we can get we are in the earlier one, we were just adding a log or adding some alert. We can also return some value from a function. So it can include any type of value, whether it can be like in this case, you can see we are just adding a return keyword to the sum. It is just like the sum function, get sum. We are just totaling out in a total variable, summing all those two parameters, and then we are returning the value of total. So that value can be assigned to other variables, or it can be console logged, or it can be like reused in any way. So when we call this function, it will not log something out because we are not logging something in this function. We're just returning the value. So when somebody calls this get sum function, so he will get the value returned by this function. So the value will be the sum of both these parameters. So in this case, 26 will be uh, returned, and then that will be alerted out in this alert function. We can also use that sum in another variable as well. So that's up to you how you want to use this return value. So we can do this way. You can see we have this divide numbers, and we are getting the array stored in a square bracket, and we are returning that array. Now you can see we are storing it or storing that array inside a variable. Earlier we were just logged it out in alert. Now in this we are just storing the value returned by this function in a variable, this all variable. So this all variable will be an array which contains this dividend, divisor and quotient. If we all like if we get the values by the index, so we'll get the different values. You can see that. So this is the way how you can use the return value in different way as well. So you can store it in a variable and then that variable can be used like anyhow you can use that variable. So we also have function expression. This is function declaration. You can see that. So this way you can also create a function, and there is other way to create a function as well, which is this function expression. So in this we store the like function in a variable. It can be any name you can specify here. And after that we specify an equal symbol and then we specify function keyword. After that we don't specify any name to it because this variable name will be used as a function name while calling it. And then we specify the parentheses after this function. So this way you can also create a function. So this was another way of creating the function. So you can see this is the function, the same function which we used, but with a function expression. Now we are calling it like this, and we can also store the result in a separate variable that we already seen the last video or in the last slide. So this way, the syntax of the function declaration and function expression looks very similar, but they differ in the way they're evaluated. Check out the following example. So you can see in this, we have this declaration, function declaration. So this is declared after calling this function. So this doesn't give us any error. It will be satisfied or it will be called very normally. So, and in this case, a function expression is used as a function declaration or function creation function. So you can see this variable is assigned a function expression. And now if we call it before declaring it, so it will give us the error that undefined is not a function because we're calling a function that is yet to define. But when we are using a function declaration, we can call it before it is defined or before it is declared actually. So this is the basic difference. If you're using a function declaration or a normal function declaration, you can call it before or before declaring it. You can call that function. But if you're using a function expression, you cannot call it before it is defined because this expression isn't defined yet and we are calling it before it is defined. So that's why it is giving us undefined as a result. But in this case, we can call it before it is declared actually. So this is the basic difference between both of them. So obviously we should use this one, the function declaration. But if you are calling the function in an order, then this one is the easiest one. So you can use this one as well. But make sure you don't call it before it is defined. So remember that. We also have a variable scope in a function. So however, you can declare the variables anywhere in JavaScript, but the location of the declaration determines the extent of a variable's availability within the JavaScript program. It implies where the variable can be used or accessed. This accessibility is known as variable scope. So we can define variables anywhere in the program, but it has a certain availability within a block. So when we say we are defining a variable in a function, so that will be used in that function only. So that is like will it be available in that function or not. So this kind of accessibility is called variable scope. So whether we can use that variable in a function or not, this is the thing. Now you can see that we have this function greet world. Inside that we have created this variable greet. But if I try to use this greet variable outside of this function, now you can see it is giving me the error that greet is not defined. So this is the case, or this is the difference basically. If you're specifying or clear by default, variables declared within a function have local scope. That means they cannot be viewed or manipulated from outside of that function. So we cannot reuse that variable or use this variable outside of this function if it is defined inside. Similarly, if it is a global variable or if it is defined outside a function, so we can use this variable inside the function as well as outside the function as well. So you can see both of them are giving us the right result. So basically this type of a declaration or definition of a function is called global scope because we can use it globally anywhere in a program or anywhere in a function. So this kind of variable is called global scope variable. So you have to remember sometimes we want global scope variables, sometimes you want local scope variables. That is up to you how you want to use a variable. So this is the end of the slide. In the next video, we'll be doing all of the things practically. Thank you for watching. Let's meet in the another one.